and welcome back to another edition of Inside Great Lakes Sailing. My name is Greg Norman. We're lucky enough to have with us today the Olympic Sailing Committee Chairman, Bruce Burton. First of all, Bruce, thanks for joining us. And unfortunately, we're in the middle of this pandemic, so we get a chance to talk over Zoom and not necessarily face-to-face, but I really appreciate you coming aboard.
Thanks, Greg, for having me.
I guess what I want to start with is that you're a Grosse Pointe guy. You went to Liggett, and you're local. And so maybe start a little bit about your background in sailing, and then we'll kind of work our way up to the Olympic, and I'm sure we can talk a lot about that. So when was the first time you jumped in a boat?
When I was 5 years old.
Mom and dad sailed?
Absolutely. My dad grew up at Detroit Yacht Club.
Okay. And from there, where did it go? A lifelong?
Well, he joined Bayview in 1970. He was Commodore in 81, and I had a 470 and sailed a lot back in the 1970s. I graduated Liggett in 73, and then college. I went to Tufts University. We had the #1 sailing team, intercollegiate sailing team, back in the 70s. Joe Duplin was our coach, but sailed out of Bayview, sailed a 470. And Wally Cross, who's another big-time Bayview guy, he also had a 470. We were arch rivals, had a lot of fun back then. Did some intercollegiate sailing, did well in that, and then started sailing the Flying Dutchman in the late 70s and early 80s, and did 2 Olympic campaigns in 80 and 84. Got twisted around the axle with that boycott in 80. That wasn't a very good thing. But I had the same feel right now that 1980, we had to wait 4 years, and this time in 2020, we have to wait another year. So it seems like we're a little bit jinxed on this Olympic thing.
I think of 1984 Los Angeles, where it's the first time they let women run the marathon. And Joan Benoit, they just did not believe that women could go beyond a limit in terms of the mileage. And it turns out that when Joan Benoit won the race, she would have been in the top 30 of the men running. And you think about 1984 in Los Angeles and that coming back from 80, especially after it won the hockey gold in Lake Placid. It's just our thinking. It was even in 1984, we didn't think women could run the marathon. That's bizarre. So you've been competitive. You've been a competitive sailor your whole life.
Yes, sir. Yep.
Just a side question: what do you like sailing? Why do you like sailing on? You've sailed all over the world. What's nice about Lake St. Clair?
Well, Lake St. Clair is one of my favorite places to sail. First of all, the water is really nice. It's nice to sail on fresh water. A lot of our big competitions are obviously in salt water, so it's nice to get back to the Great Lakes and sail in Lake St. Clair. That area that we sail the sea course in, DRYA, I grew up sailing there, and I just love the waves and the wind shifts. It just fits our style completely. And so we tend to do really well in conditions like that. When we were world champion in the Etchells in 86 and 87, very similar conditions in Lake Ontario, and then Marblehead, even though that was an ocean, it was kind of flat water, less than 12 knots of breeze. And so it's just a great place to sail. And then, of course, going back to Bayview at the end of the racing is the ultimate.
I noticed that in the paper recently that San Diego Bay is actually closed from boating at the moment. So even something like that, I lived in San Diego for a long time, and it breaks your heart with where we're at, from that perspective. You're jumping into the administrative end of sailing. When did that occur? And maybe take us through that trail, how you got to where you are now.
Sure. Gary Jobson, who you've interviewed, great guy and good friend of mine, after I completed my Commodore stint at Bayview in 2010, called me up and said, "Okay, Bruce, you've been Commodore at Bayview. It's time for you to give back at a national level. We'd like to have you run for the board." And so I ran for the board. U.S. Sailing was elected in 2011, worked my way up through the ranks and became president, served as president for 3 years and finished that up in 2018. And Corey Sertle, who's the president now, asked me to chair the Olympic Sailing Committee, and that's my current position.
How long has the Olympics had sailing?
Since the late 1800s, I think.
Okay.
I wish you wouldn't ask. I think 1896 or around in there. It was there since the origination.
I know we just canceled, and we can kind of get through that whole process, but maybe tell us specifically what job responsibility you have as chairman.
Well, one of the first and most important things we do is select the team. So we have a subcommittee of the Olympic Sailing Committee. It's called the Selection Committee, and it's headed up by J.J. Federer. And some big-time Olympic sailors are on that committee. and they design the trial system. So that's the very first and foremost thing the committee does. We also act as an oversight committee, and we also act as a fundraising committee. We don't have direct responsibility for the day-to-day operations. We have professional staff that handles that, but we advise the board of directors of U.S. Sailing of the important things that happen within the Olympic sailing program. And the board of directors under Corey is very involved with the program also. But we're the day-to-day volunteer group that really helps and supports the Olympic sailing effort in the United States.
How many classes are there of sailing, of races, or sail? Let me start over. How many classes are there in of race boats are there in Olympics?
Sure. So we like to call them events as opposed to classes. So we have 10 events, and you've got 2 laser events, 2 470 events. You have the Finn, which is the single-handed men's event. You've got the 49ers, the 49er and the FX. So you have men and women skiffs, and then you have the men and women boards, and you have the NACRA, which is a co-ed event. So they like to call it events.
So if I'm a 19-year-old, I'm a 17-year-old, a high school sailor at 420, I look at the Walls brothers from Crescent who are looking at trying to make a campaign in 2024 on the 49er, raising money for a boat, those kinds of things. So making the Olympic sailing team is like making U.S. key team. You got to be one of the top 5 guys, 6 guys within your class. So is it a trials for the particular year of the Olympics, or is it something you gain time and points over a 4-year period of Olympic competition or of national?
Okay, well, if you start at the end and then work backwards, and I've spoken to the Walls brothers and really would look forward to helping them on this journey. So starting with the Olympics and working backwards, to go to the Olympics, you have to win the Olympic trials. And there's only one event per country. So that means you have to be the top 49er skipper, you got to be the top 470 skipper. So you might have 3 or 4 470s on the sailing team, but only one of them is going to go. And that's what that Olympic selection is all about, is you've got to win that selection. So how do you get on the team then before even you get to the trials? Well, you have to be in the top group in the world to get on the team. So that's how you qualify on the team. Although anybody can typically go to the trials if they can qualify for the regatta the trials is. So typically we use world championships for our Olympic trials. So you'll have to qualify for the Olympic trials, whether you're on the team or not. And then you have to be the top boat at those world championships.
Is being the Olympic chairman a full-time job?
Yes, it is. Unpaid full-time job.
Yeah, unpaid volunteer full-time job.
Yep.
What's the upside to it? And I don't necessarily a downside, but what's the good stuff and what's the stuff that gives you headaches?
Well, the good stuff is helping people. I mean, after I got to the top of my sailing career, which was winning world championships, and I didn't get to go to the Olympics because of the boycott, and then I didn't win the trials in '84. The men that beat me in the trials won the gold medal in the Flying Dutchman, which I was particularly satisfied with. I really committed, my sailing to this point of helping other people. And I've sold a number of business, well, not a number, I've sold a couple businesses along the way. So I don't have to go to the office every day for employment. So my whole gig in my life right now is helping other people. And that's what I want to do. So that's the upside for me, is helping these young sailors achieve their dreams and hopefully win medals for our country. The downside and the hard side is, raising the money and getting the logistics together, keeping everybody motivated while it's difficult going. So I'd say the finances are the hard part, but the satisfaction is helping people.
We're talking millions or tens of millions to set up a program and set up a campaign for an Olympic trial and for an Olympic event like we just had canceled for Japan.
Yeah, so we're looking, our budget is in the high 3 million to low 5 million per year, depending on the run rate and everything. So $4 to $4.5 million is a run rate for us in the U.S., and that's for all the different events that we have, and that includes all the world travel. That does not include, that's at the national level. That does not include what the individual campaigners are doing. So if we put all their money into it, we're probably as a country spending double that amount. So that's the nut we got to raise every year. And obviously with this delay in the Olympics is going to make it hard for this next 12 months.
Where do we rank in the world as sailors?
Well, historically, we have more medals than any other country, but we've been losing ground. The last 6 quads, last 6 4-year periods, we've really been slipping. And that's really been as a result of it becoming a professional sport. And so many of our really good professional sailors, and this is not taking anything away from our current campaigners, are making their living sailing professionally. And the problem is that all of our Olympian sailors could be professional sailors, but you can't do both. You can't go make a wage, and you can't do a professional level Olympics in. You need to be spending 200 days a year in your Olympic boat. And that's a lot of time, and you can't have a job and do that too.
Okay, so it isn't like the dream team and with the boys that they had back in when basketball, where you could take that 2 week off, have a practice, and move forward. If you're saying you've got to be in the boat 200 days a year, but aren't dumb question, but aren't professional sailors good enough to not have to be in the boat 200 days a year?
These boats are so specific. If you look at like the 49er, that is such a balanced game, literally a balanced game. You're sailing standing up. You can't just go from an Etchells or a boat where a 505 where you're sitting down to a boat that you're standing up like a skiff class. So you just can't do that.
So how many professional sailors are there in the world, and what's our percentage of those guys that could come back and sail for the Olympics?
Well, that's a really great question. We are in the process of looking at U.S. sailing, and I know we just reached out to a number of professional sailors in this country, and the email count was 300 in this country alone. And so there's a lot of people out there. And really what it gets down to, the reason we'd like to have more sailors is it's like any competition. The more competitors you have, the better the top guys get. So if we could get more people training with the people that we have right now, we just are going to get a lot better. And that's really what's happened. If you look what's happened over the last 7 quads, is so many of the boats that we used to have in the Olympics back in the day, we used to sail at Bayview. We used to sail at Crescent. Those were boats that we'd sail every day. We used to sail the Flying Dutchman out of Bayview. They had a whole bunch of Flying Dutchmen out of Crescent. All those boats are gone. So sure, we have lasers in this country, and that's great, but we don't have a big fleet of 470s. Their 49ers are literally non-existent compared to what they used to be. We'd be better off. We had lightning and snipes. We'd be winning gold medals all day long in terms of having depth of fleet. We just don't have depth of fleet.
When I look at opties as beginners and those little front flat boats, and then we go to 420s, there's not much in between. One of the conversations that we're having within DYRA is discussions about a middle boat from an opti to a 420 so that there's a better transition. Does that lack of, like you're saying, lack of those various boats hurts the overall process, but could we do a better job at the bottom end of developing kids into boats that are more competitive internationally?
Yeah, I think so. But if you look at how we're doing on the youth end of sailing in this country, we're doing absolutely fantastic. Remember that in 2018, we were the top youth nation in the world, and last year we were number 3. So we do have a good pipeline. Could we choose our boats a little bit better? Absolutely, yes. You hit the nail right on the head. I think we need to get out of the Optimist sooner, and we need to get into high-performance boats sooner. No doubt about that. But at the top end of our youth sailing, we are doing absolutely fantastic. Where our American system tends to break down is when these really good sailors go to college. They go from sailing pretty darn fast boats with trapezes and spinnakers to 4 years of hiking boats with no spinnakers and no trapezes. They slow down. And plus those boats being not high performance boats and short courses, they don't get that big course boat speed that you need in the Olympics. You need big course boat speed in the Olympics to win.
I think of the baseball analogy. Kids use metal bats going in high school. When they get to college, they've got to use wood bats. Mm-hmm. And there's a transition because it's just a different instrument. And it's a lot easier to hit with a metal bat than a wood bat. So it kind of, what's the number of kids in this area, and I say the Midwest, at that pipeline, that national pipeline? Are we represented nationally as a region?
Yes, we're doing a nice job nationally. Could we be a little bit stronger? And anybody could, but we're very pleased with how we're doing nationally. And, Grosse Pointe Yacht Club, Crescent, Bayview, they're all hosting regattas at different levels for the youth. That's really important, hosting regattas and providing coaching. U.S. Sailing has a really good education process for the coaches. I would encourage all the yacht clubs to avail themselves of the U.S. Sailing education process for the coaches, and then get the kids in the boats. Hats off to the Detroit area for this high school sailing too. This is really bringing in the awareness of competitive sailing. Although the high school boats aren't high performance boats, it doesn't matter. We're getting the kids in the boats, and it's great competition. So I'm really pleased to see what we're doing in the Detroit area on that.
having taken over the junior program at Crescent, one of the things I noticed as a coach, I've been a lifelong college coach and high school coach in a couple of other sports, but we spend more of our time racing than we do practicing.
Mm-hmm.
That didn't make sense to me last year. One of the things I think we've changed this year, we've dropped some dates for DYRA to consolidate race dates so the kids get more time in the boats. And then the second part of that discussion is, and I'll use the term sandlot baseball, which is a term I use all the time. We don't have very few kids that get in boats that don't have supervision. We don't let kids go sail. And I think that's something that helps that pipeline of process because, you know, it's the multi-sport athlete now versus the single sport athlete. College coaches want multi-sport athletes because they have a larger, background to draw from because it isn't all the same. And if you use the federation numbers and U.S. sailing numbers are also, if a kid gets in a boat at 8 years old, these are your own U.S. sailing numbers. If he sails a competitive season, he's liable to 65% chance of dropping out by the time he's 15 because he's not having fun.
Absolutely.
And
You're absolutely right.
If you're being coached 75% of the time, there's a disconnect with the kid because it's not fun anymore.
You hit the nail right on the head. When I grew up down at Bayview in the 70s, we spent half the time Baylor fighting, getting in trouble, just having fun on boats. And that's really what it was. And we only raced formally with the clubs one day a week. It was on Saturdays. And then we just, go up there on occasion and hang out at Grosse Pointe Yacht Club or the Little Club or Crescent, and it was much more social.
We had a lady last year who was standing on the shore with me, and her little daughter was going in a circle with her little Optimist. She was kind of left behind a little bit on the fleet. She was going in a circle, and the mom was all bent out of shape about, oh my God, she's not keeping up with the fleet. She goes, what are you going to do? And I said, I'm going to stay here and watch her. Why? See a smile on her face? Yeah. She's 8 years old. She's going in a circle because whatever reason she wants to go in a circle, it makes some fun. Yep. She's in 3 feet of water. She's not going to drown. She's fine. Yep. And if something happens, we're standing here. We can jump in. And I think we've lost that to some extent. And I say that as the outside guy, not having been a junior racer, but as being a coach in other sports, it kind of plays to that. So it's getting kids in more opportunities. And we're going to supervise a lot of our sandlot sailing this summer, provided we get a chance to sail. So the kids can just go out and you put the supervision in place because you obviously have liability. And I think that's huge. I think that's really a big deal. Tomorrow,
I applaud you, Greg. Fantastic plan.
We're going to tomorrow we're going to have a chance to interview John Pierce, I believe is his name, who's the youth director for U.S. Sailing. And we're going to talk about this very subject about how you make it fun. What is it that you're trying to do? We use all of our instructors are U.S. Sailing 101 certified. And you look through the book, and we've changed our tenet now to SMILE. Our acronym is, if you're not smiling, you don't get to sail with us. It's pretty simple.
There you go. I love that.
Kind of a different deal.
Yep.
Which brings us back to there. In your mind, to me, there should be a pipeline, a very specific pipeline if a kid wants to get there, and that's 1 out of 1,000 that wants to make that Olympic team. You think we are strong enough here in the lake and the areas that we can?
Absolutely. It really gets down to commitment on it and the funding. You got to have money and you got to have commitment. And there is a little bit of a body type thing though too. You do have to have the right body type. I mean, if you're sailing the 49er, you got to be tall and lanky. Right?
Okay.
The 470, skipper's 130, 135 pounds, and the crew's 160 and 6 foot tall. So you need to have body type and you got to have money.
So for short, fat kids like I would probably not fit in any boat.
That would be a little bit tough. No, if you're short, you just have to lose the weight.
Right. No, I get the point. Without belaboring, I do want to get this conversation headed towards, we obviously have canceled the Olympics in Japan. They're talking now about having something before the summer of 2021. I guess what I'd like to know from you is, you've been a part of that discussion, certainly. Kind of take us through when it first became on your radar and what that now means from an operational standpoint moving forward. And again, you got to go through all this work again through the next 12 months if it turns out. So when did it first pop up on your radar?
Oh, well, as soon as this virus hit, it was immediately on the radar. So this was late January, early February. We started talking about it. Then the virus started moving around the world. We started talking about, we had a whole bunch of teams all over the world. We had them in Australia, in Spain, all over the place. And we had to bring all the team back. We got them back before they locked down the borders and got the boats and containers, got them shipping back. So we were in full on mode the first part of March. It was just crazy. Now we're in the financial mode. We've got another year of financing to do. And if you could imagine the typical Olympic program's 4 years long for a kid, and the first year you're ramping up, so the finances are not that big in the first year. So in this case, you have a 5-year program, and the last year is always the biggest year financially. And so, or the second last year and the last year are the two biggest years financially. So we have another year of big finances for these kids. And it's really tough because we've also lost training partners, because some of the kids, we have 70% of our Olympic trials are already completed. So we've already picked 7 out of 10 of our events. So some of the athletes are not continuing on. Well, those would have been training partners for the ones that are staying on. So it's a tough situation right now.
When you make the decisions for your own country, it's one thing. Now you're making decisions based on the amount of folks that sail in the Olympics, and it becomes a completely different situation because the pandemic necessarily wasn't in different places at different times. So that becomes a much larger discussion and a more difficult discussion, I would think.
Absolutely right. Absolutely right. One thing I want to say, though, also, we had an Olympic sailing call on this a few days ago, is that there is an advantage for us because we have some really talented athletes that are really making improvements right now. You look at Steph and Maggie in the 49er FX, they just finished 3rd in the world championship, and they are really coming on strong. So giving them a little bit more time. Paige Raley has been injured. She has more time for recovery now. So we have a lot of talented athletes, Anna Weiss and Riley in the NACRA. These are really talented athletes that are making very big gains right now on the world level. And so they're getting traction against the top people in the world. So we think that this time off, well, we won't be taking time off, but this year of delay can help them go up that learning curve. So, as much as we have another year of fundraising, we really look forward to the opportunity of these athletes improving on the interim.
So what's happening now with Tokyo? Where is the Olympics going to be run next year? Have they picked it, or the same spot?
Exact same spot. They've only changed the opening day one day. So this year it was supposed to be the 24th of July was going to be the opening ceremonies. Next year it'll be the 23rd. So the good thing about that for us is all our wind and weather and current data should be relatively the same. We were really concerned if they were to move it to May or June, which would be a better temperature time. Tokyo is not as hot, and we're down in Enoshima, which is south of the city, but it's still very hot there. But so at least our models, our weather models will be good.
Cool. You mentioned international competitors need to be in their boats 200 days a year. Does that not make them professional?
Oh, they are. Everyone's professional by action, whether they're paid for it by not or
right.
Not. They're all professional by action.
Which isn't any different than what skiers used to be, which is, speed
Absolutely.
skaters, any not sort of non-middle stream or secondary type Olympic level athletics from that perspective. So it's just, it is what it is. So the back end of this now becomes fundraising first, I would think.
Yeah, for us, our Olympic Committee, we are really, really concerned about the fundraising. So as I said, that's one of the main legs of the stool. I know for me, Brian Keene from Massachusetts, he's the chairman of our Olympic Resource Board, and he's the one who's leading our fundraising efforts within the committee. We also have the foundation, the U.S. Sailing Foundation, led by Bill Rue. He's also very instrumental, and we obviously have a fundraising staff at U.S. Sailing.
Some Olympic committees, sport specific, have easier times in raising money than others, just because of numbers. We're sailing in that.
We're down the list, and one of the biggest problems is we're not a spectator sport. We can't fill stands, and so that really makes commercial sponsorship hard for us. We tend to have industry-specific sponsors. We've had, for example, Sperry Topsider was one of our lead sponsors, our lead sponsor in our last quad. They're not with us as our lead sponsor of this quad, although we have great sponsors like Harkin. North Sales has helped quite a bit. Quantum has helped. So we have really good industry sponsors, but they're not the level of a big name sponsor like a car company or an oil company or a bank.
I have my Sperry U.S. team shoes on as we speak, just because I'm wearing blue today. Exactly. So some of those, when they sell those kinds of products, I'm assuming you get a bump on some of those kinds of products. Yes.
Yeah, well, typically we're sponsored. Spirit was a wonderful sponsor. They sponsor us now to a smaller extent. They sponsor at two levels. They give you cash, and they also value in kind. So they typically would provide all the team gear, which really works great. We have a lot of nice swag.
Will your program recover from this pandemic? Do you think to a point where you are better, worse?
I think we will recover. I think we'll be better. And I also want to mention Helly Hansen. I'm sorry. They handle all our apparel now, and they're doing a great job. I'm wearing a Helly shirt. Yeah, we are going to recover from this, and our planning on our side is to come out of this stronger than if we had it. Our attitude is we're Americans, and we're going to use this to our advantage. So we're going to get stronger.
An optimistic attitude. I think that's outstanding. But numbers of kids sailing today from 5 years ago, from 10 years ago, is going down, and part of that's because the population is decreasing. Does that worry you?
I think that it does in general because of sports competition. There's so many more sports now, and sailing does take so much time compared to some other sports. In swimming, you hop in the pool for an hour and you're done. Sailing is like golf. It takes a lot more time, and it is expensive. But I will say the quality of what we're doing in this country is unbelievable in sailing. I mean, I look at our youth programs, the quality of our youth programs, and the way we've come from, I won't say nowhere, but from the middle of the pack of the youth sailing country to the top. I just think it's all about the dedicated level of programs like we have at DRYA, producing kids that once they get to the national level, and U.S. sailing, helping those programs get to the very top of the world level. The whole system is working great, and I'm looking forward to having you talk to John Pierce and have him take you how that's happening. So yeah, in the big scheme of things, I am a little concerned about the numbers, but I'm not going to lose sleep at it because the quality of what's going is so good.
Okay. The question that I keep coming back to is the formality of junior racing seems to be more involved with parents than it has been in other sports. And I'm a USSA skier coach. I'm a USSA ski coach. And I know from that model and that level, we've run mid-AMs, and it's the same pipeline that you're involved in. In skiing, you kind of release the kids away from the opportunity for parents because most of them are at the bottom of the hill. But watching races that we've run, even at at Crescent, it just amazes me that some cases they won't race because they're worried about their points instead of just going out and sailing. And you wonder if that stymies the growth of what we're trying to accomplish here. I don't know. As an old junior sailor, is that something we should look at?
I think so. Our daughter Joan was an All-American swimmer in high school and college. And we were taught as younger parents, we said, look, you drop the kid off at the pool, let the coach do their work, you pick them up, you keep the towels clean and dry, make sure they have a suit in the bag when they go to the meet. And that's the attitude we had. We were there in support. But sailors tend to have very active parents. And, you call them helicopter parents. And that's not true for all parents by any means.
No.
They tend to be that way. And there's a very good pipeline from high quality sailing into high quality universities. It is a known fact. So a lot of parents use the sailing as a way to get their kids into good schools. And we certainly understand that as parents. And so they're very invested.
If you had a magic wand in our area, southeastern Michigan and the Great Lakes, is there anything that you would add to the agenda to make us a stronger junior program?
I think I would encourage higher end competitors to come into our area. I would host regattas where we'd have our youth sailors exposed to higher level competitors. And I also would encourage traveling. And I would kind of do a little bit of a barbell thing. I'd have a little bit more fun and more what I would call training, and a little bit less racing, and then more high-end competition. So I think that's what I would do. I would emphasize the fun. I would focus on training, not just racing. And training means really good skill sets in the boat, and you can develop good skill sets with with drills and things like that, which can be fun, and then also expose them to some high-end sailing.
Would getting our junior sailors, especially the better 420 sailors, out with some of the bigger boat guys on the Monday night, tandem matches and some of the lesser competitive races, we have this conversation about, the adults want to have the kids out and the kids want to go, but they don't seem to ever find themselves each other. I would think the big boat experience would help that younger sailor.
That's you bring up a great point. When I grew up, that's what you did. You basically had two choices on a Saturday. You either go sailing on your family boat or somebody else's race boat, or you sail for your club. Well, there was only one boat per club. So all the other kids that were 15 or 20 kids in the junior program would go out on their dad's boat or their friend's dad's boat. And that's what we did. And you can learn so fast from other people than trying to figure out yourself. And that's one of the difficulties I have with the optimist. If you took a 10-year-old kid and put him in, like we used to have interlakes, we'd have 5 or 6 people in the interlake. You would learn so fast. I was in there with Al DeClerc and Bob DeClerc, and they taught me how to swear and sail so well, so quickly you would believe.
We have a Cal 20 that belongs to the junior sailing program at Crescent, and I went to look at the schedule from last year because I want to use it 2 or 3 days a week after our regular program is done, and come to find out that there was 94 days the boat was used last year, and it was used 91 days by a member. Well, we opened the boat up and looked in it, and it's basically his boat now. He's got all of his own stuff in it. And we've kind of had to tell him that we're going to campaign it and use it every day so that 5 or 6 kids can go out and sail and use it for practical purposes. And he's angry because, well, we're kicking him out of a boat that he doesn't own. So
I kind of call that communist yachting when somebody else, provides it for you.
For real. Last question is, what is it that I've asked this question of almost everybody. We sail for a reason. It's not a sport. It's a lifestyle. And I guess, what is it to you that makes what makes your blood boil about sailing? What's the thing you love the most?
Oh God, I just love sailing up the Detroit River out to the mouth of Lake St. Clair there, out towards the sea course, and that feeling of freedom. And no matter what's going on in your life, good or bad, you forget about all that.
Yep.
And it just is that freedom of thought where you're just with the boat and the wind and your friends. My favorite time is that sail out to the race course with the anticipation of what's going to happen. What's the wind going to do? How are we going to perform? Do we have the boat set up right? And no matter how bad business is or whatever problems there are in the world, you forget it and you have a timeout. And it's full to me. It's the ultimate recreation.
Well, listen, I appreciate your time. And best of luck. I do want to point out that it's nice to have somebody at the highest level of sailing that's from Grosse Pointe. So I'm sure you've worked, all the work that goes into it is, there's lots of folks who have been rewarded for the efforts you put in. So I want to thank you for that on their behalf, certainly.
Thank you very much. I appreciate you having me on the program.